Hey you guys, Eric from RuleTheWasteland.com. It may shock you to know that even I, Eric from RuleTheWasteland.com, have haters. And interestingly enough, someone who is trying to trash me on Twitter was making fun of my hair, saying I had a receding hairline. Now, I'm not without my flaws, for sure, but if you're gonna come at me, try to make me feel bad, I would choose something other than my glorious hair. You're not even in the same zip code as my insecurities. So not sure what that's about. Maybe my Twitter profile pic just has a little too much shadow on it or something, but there's one thing that I got going for me. It's my glorious hair.
I'm still young, still springtime fresh.
And, apparently, some of my predictions.
I know everything! I am everything!
Now, I just made a video talking about how you shouldn't base your preps on specific predictions and not specific time frames, but I do still always try to figure out what's going on, see what trends are, and timelines are always the hardest thing, so I've been trying to move away from that. But, you know, your brain comes up with an idea of what it thinks is going to happen. And I've been talking about, you know, all the stuff that's going on in the world for the last year and so when it comes to the war in Ukraine. And I have been, for the most part, disagreeing with what in the mainstream media, maybe not in the prepper side of the internet, but what in the mainstream media is viewed as the just the status quo, the general idea of what's going on. And there's a few other people who have been much more correct on this. Some of you may recognize this swarthy gentleman who has been talking about these things fairly, you know, I don't want to say alone, but, you know, not a lone voice, but a lonely voice in terms of the content that he's been putting out. And has been pretty vindicated so far. And unfortunately for the Ukrainians and for NATO, that appears to be continuing, because we have one hell of a narrative change being put out right now. And I've seen this format, I don't even know what you want to call it, this process playing out. We saw big time with a lot of the vaccine related stuff, where, you know, when initially you come out with something that goes against, you know, it's a bad thing, it goes against the mainstream status quo, you're completely shut down. Like we saw, you'd literally be kicked off of Twitter, demonetized on YouTube for disagreeing with the status quo. Then it becomes allowed. You know, you're not right, but then it becomes allowed. And then begrudgingly, you're sort of right, but for the wrong reasons. Be like, well, you were stupid, you got there by the wrong thought processes, but this is now the truth. And then they move on to, and they do this weird pivot where right before they admit and start promoting what may be the actual truth or what's currently going on right then, they start putting out a little bit of like their own content about that, whether that's a study, whether that's a news article. And then sure as shit, 5-6 months later, when you say, you guys have been wrong about the whole time, like, we weren't wrong. Look, here's an article that we made. Here's a study we made showing that here's a hearing where we said that we never did any study that says, you know, the vaccine stops transmission. Here's us admitting that, you know, there are some negative effects. And now we're seeing one hell of a pivot when it comes to the war in Ukraine, which is not good news. And so we've heard for months, how many articles have we seen about Russia running out of ammo? How many people have we heard saying that they're falling apart? You know, they're riding mules into battle. They've got vans full of artillery shells bouncing around while some poor kid or grandpa drives or whatever. We had the ghost of Ukraine taking out everyone. We've had supermodels and grandmas taking out Russian forces. We've had farmers dragging off their tanks. And any day now, they're going to be humiliated and leave any day now after they run out of ammo for the 4th time. And now we have, and I've been over here, me, Canadian Prepper, Vox Day, Gonzalo Lira, a few other people, and I've been over here saying some different things. One of which is that there's going to be a massive offensive, probably coming in the, not spring yet, but late winter, while the ground is still frozen. I mean, like, we've seen, it was so bizarre to me to see them mobilizing, you know, hundreds of thousands of troops, when, from the information that we have, it's very possible that they were winning and making progress with a troop disadvantage, or at least a troop parity. And now we've dumped tons of money, billions of dollars into Ukraine, tons of materiel, And still they're absorbing all that while running out of ammo. And now, like, I don't know what people thought. They were mobilizing 300,000 troops just to take a group photo, like, or they were just going to be like, psych, actually, we're collapsing. I guess that's what they thought. And now here's some articles from Yahoo News. This is not fucking Conspiracy Theory Central, unless you know, then it really is. But here's the article. Sorry, I'm kind of rambling. Russia prepares large-scale offensive in next 10 days. Wow, what was that recent video by our swarthy friend?
Bye, folks.
Oh, yes, there it is. 1 day ago. Major alert. Huge crisis in 10 days. Is that clickbait? I don't know, because Yahoo is saying the same thing. It says Russia prepares large-scale offensive in 10 days. The Financial Times is also saying this, with reference to an unnamed advisor to the armed forces of Ukraine. The Russian offensive will likely aim to capture the entire Donbass region and may begin in the west of Luhansk Oblast, near the cities of Kreminna and Lyman, where Russia has been assembling forces for several weeks. The Financial Times also notes that Russia is building up its troops in south of Donetsk Oblast, with additional forces being deployed to villages around occupied Mariupol. According to the Financial Times, Russia's goal is to launch the offensive before Ukraine receives Western tanks and weapons. Wow, what a shocker. I was literally just telling that to a friend of mine. I'm like, well, they're obviously going to launch an offensive pretty soon, if they're going to do it at all, because of the frozen ground, before any of these Abrams get over there and all that nonsense, before they have a chance to train up on them, and that's probably at least a month out. So it's going to happen probably soon. That seems to be what's happening. It says these are proper mechanized brigades, even if they are less capable than they were at the beginning of the war. They've reinforced the airborne and marine units. These are not bus drivers and school teachers, he said. Well, I thought they were. That's what we've been hearing the whole time. And then here's an even more shocking article that just came out yesterday. And this is a prime example of that narrative shift that I'm talking about. Because how much have we heard about them running out of ammo, about they're about to lose, about they're losing ground, Ukraine is winning, making all this progress. And now right before these things happen, they're putting out their content so they can go back and say, what do you mean we were wrong? We said this was going to happen. So here's an article from 1 day ago. Vladimir Putin is about to make shock gains, again from the Telegraph and forwarded by Yahoo News. Shocking to whom would be my question. And the article says, with Russia back on the offensive after significant Ukraine combat successes around Kharkiv and Kherson, and they have had some successes there, obviously, but to the extent that was allowed, is debatable, or was a strategic withdrawals. And, it's not like Russia has not had any losses or taken any hits in this, so, I'm not one of those, like, super, just saying Russia's doing nothing wrong. Because I don't support Russia, I'm just trying to find out exactly what's happening. Anyways, the Ukrainian defense minister says Russia has mobilized much more than 300,000 troops, perhaps up to 500,000, and these are pouring into Ukraine in preparation for what is expected to be a major offensive in the coming days and weeks. Although Kiev has also been building up its forces and supplying them with modern equipment donated by the West. That's actually in the article. Here we go. Putin has a much greater advantage in troop numbers than he did when he invaded a year ago. Wow, it's almost like organizing 500,000 troops will give you a significant advantage. And here's an interesting tidbit. Despite repeated optimistic reports of Russia running low on artillery shells, a battle winner in this conflict, Putin's war stocks are vast and his factories have been working around the clock to churn out even more. That's quite a pivot to several even reports of how their manufacturing is almost gone, they're running on fumes, they've run out of ammo, to now say, right when they're about to come in to dropping the hammer, that Putin's war stocks are vast and his factories have been working around the clock. It says, under pressure towards the end of the year, Russia withdrew its forces to positions of strength, trading ground for time as it massed resources for a planned hammer blow while grinding down the Ukrainians in the east. So, it's so ridiculous that they come out and they're saying all this stuff that we know have been true for months. People like Canadian Prep have been saying this for months. And now they're coming out and trying to swoop in and not be wrong at the last second when this stuff's already happening. And it's like they're saying, like, oh, you're going to kick a field goal here when the ball's already in the air. You know, and then taking credit for their predictions or for their reporting. It's pathetic. And it shouldn't work, but because of the Gelman amnesia effect and just the normalcy bias, it does work. And I guarantee you, a few months from now, when anyone says, like, these people were wrong the whole time, they're like, what are you talking about? They made an article right now, like 10 days before the attack, saying that this was going to happen, that Putin was going to make tons of gains. Absurd. And it even says, until now, the narrative in the West has been that Ukraine is comfortably winning this war. You don't say. Albeit while abstaining heavy bombardments on its major cities. The reality is more complex. Translation, they've been wrong or lying. Usually both. It says, the latest estimates suggest that each side may have taken upwards of 120 casualties already. Hardly indicative of a triumph for Ukraine. Yeah, no shit. The interesting thing about this is I was just talking to a friend of mine about how to spot sophistry in terms of when people are reporting. It's super hard to absorb all this information and pick what you think is right. What's much easier is to find out who's lying and then to base your assessment on what they're saying and on what they want to happen. For example, there was an article that I looked at a while back when I was trying to figure out the casualties on both sides. Like, what are the actual numbers of troops that are being lost here? And the article put forth by Western sources, you know, Ukrainian and NATO forces, was written like this. It said, the Russians have suffered up to 120,000 killed and wounded in the war so far, and Ukrainians have up to 13,000 or whatever the number was killed. Instantly, that stood out to me. It's I have a very good sense of when people are saying something a specific way, and it's really weird. And obviously, it was instantly noticeable to me that they lumped in injuries and deaths with the Russian number and only specifically deaths with the Ukrainian number. Now, to me, that doesn't mean that either number is wrong automatically. I can't say absolutely those are wrong, and I don't have an alternative number for you. But what it absolutely does prove to me is that these people are sophists. They're liars. They are not being honest, and they have an agenda about this. And obviously the agenda here is to make the Russian number look bigger than the Ukrainian number. Are either of those numbers wrong? I don't know for sure. And if they are, which they probably are based on that, I don't know to what extent they're wrong. But they're obviously promoting the idea that Russia was taking many more losses. That's obviously what they want you to think with this article, and they're doing it by sort of half lying, sort of not really. Like, those numbers may be true when it's lumped together, but I know they're being dishonest. So I'm looking at this person and I say, this is a dishonest source. What are they wanting me to believe? If this is X, then I can be pretty damn certain that X is not happening the way that they say. And that doesn't necessarily give me a very specific idea of what is happening, but when you collect enough information from liars, you can know that sure as hell know what's not happening. And that is what they were saying. So now that 120,000 to 13 has become, well, you know, it's about 120 on each side. So we see this shifting rapidly. So does that give me a number in terms of how many people have died on either side? No, but it does tell me that the Ukrainians are certainly suffering massive casualties, and they're not winning, and they're having to move their goalpost way, 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 way in the other direction. So we know that they are completely wrong. It says, and there may be worse to come. The truth is, let's hear the truth from you. Are we getting the truth this time? The truth is that recent promises of new combat equipment for Ukraine, especially longer-range missiles, tanks, and other armored vehicles, are unlikely to be fulfilled in time to have an impact in this battle if Putin launches his offensive on the timetable Kiev predicts. With so many more men and resources at its disposal... Oh, Moscow has more resources at its disposal? Because I've been told, that they've been run out of ammunition, and they're using ancient tanks that are the dregs of their military for months. Meanwhile, we've been pouring everything that NATO has to offer after they've already absorbed one of the largest militaries in the world in Ukraine, that already had about the same number of battle tanks as all of NATO Europe combined, somewhere in that range. So with so many more men and resources, Moscow will be able to sustain higher casualty rates. This is why Russia tends to do better in wars the longer they go on. And this is exact opposite of what they're saying. They're saying before that we're burning up all the resources, are going to run out. Putin does not fear high casualties. Disproportionate number of his troops are recruited from distant provinces rather than cities such as Moscow and St. Petersburg, where a stream of body bags could have some effect on what still remains rock-solid support for him and his war. Oh, is that what you said? Because I was reading in this other article, where did we just say it? That these are not bus drivers and school teachers. That these are hardcore combat soldiers. Another concern is that while Russia forces have performed abysmally, thwarted by low troop morale, inadequate numbers, badly maintained equipment. See, they're like literally contradicting themselves in the next statement. So, substandard battle discipline, the stiffest Ukrainian resistance, and an unexpectedly united effort from the West. Some Ukrainian reports from the front indicate Russians have been learning hard lessons and making much needed improvements, at least at the level of battle tactics and discipline. The Russian army was bleeding before, but it appointed new combat. So we were wrong because they just adjusted. They didn't just continue to get their ass kicked forever and not do anything differently. What a surprise. That's why these gains by Putin are shocking, I guess, if that's the way that your brain thinks. We must therefore be prepared for significant Russian gains in the coming weeks. We need to be realistic about how bad things could be, otherwise the shock risks dislodging Western resolve. The opposite occurred last summer and autumn as flagging support in parts of Europe and the US was galvanized by Ukrainian success. It is essential that we not only maintain our combat supplies in Ukraine, but step it up even further and even faster. If Putin gains more ground, then Kiev will need to counterattack more strongly and will need more armored vehicles, better air defenses, longer range missiles, and vast quantities of artillery shells and ammunition. The only alternative is that President Zelensky is forced to come to terms handing victory to Russia and defeat to Ukraine and NATO. So that's not the only alternative, it's the inevitable outcome almost. Not quite, nothing's inevitable, but it's certainly on that way. And this is, just read that article, compare it to any article from the past, more than like a month ago, from January, February 2022 up to a couple weeks ago, and compare it to that article, and it's insane. You probably would have gotten kicked off of YouTube for posting that article or something that had the same sort of language in it in March, April of 2022. And now this is the official stance of the mainstream media, is that Vladimir Putin is about to make shock gains. And I agree, except for one point, it's not shocking to me. And let me know what you guys think. And like I said, for everyone who thinks that Canadian Prepper is just doing a bunch of doom and gloom, he's been shockingly correct on a lot of this stuff. And this is just more proof of that. So definitely check out his videos if you want to keep abreast of what's going on. I totally understand the people who are like, this stuff is just fucking bumming me out and I don't want to hear it. That's a totally different argument than, oh, this is just doom and gloom porn. Well, when there's, World War III's going on, the situation's kind of doomy and kind of gloomy. That doesn't mean that it's not true, and it doesn't mean that we shouldn't talk about it. It's very easy to avoid looking at that stuff if you don't want to, but I like having the option to try and figure out what's going on in the world and making what adjustments I need to with my preparations. So let me know what you guys think, and I will talk to you soon. Check out rulethewasteland.com.